Welcome back to The Chosen Life. I'm your host, The Chosen Lawyer. And today I have on a very esteemed friend, brother, in fact. He puts the Korman in Kormans, Mr. David Korman. David, welcome to The Chosen Life.
Well, thanks, Jonathan. It's an honor for me to be here. I think you've done a fabulous job with this show, and I don't know what episode you're up to right now. It took a while for me to get here, but it's been looking forward to this. It's a real honor to be part of this.
Well, I appreciate that. I was telling you that we had to get everything just right before you're going to make it on. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this should be episode number 36,
Wow.
if not 37. And you are now part of the new talk show set.
Yeah.
So originally it was a virtual plus in person in the podcasting set, the high tables, and then putting together the construction of the right set for a talk show like Ellen, Oprah, and getting the lighting just right. And then when we were finally fine tuned it, we were happy with it. That's when you had to come on.
Well, I'm happy you got it all set up. For me, it's just great to be here and to have the opportunity to talk to you about whatever we're going to talk about. So go ahead, hit me with whatever you want. I'm excited to be here as part of the chosen.
Well, this is not a Jerry Springer type format, so I'm not going to be bringing on any illegitimate children or anything like that. So you're rest assured you're safe.
Well, I know you did your research and you found none, so I know I'm safe.
I've looked for all the. There's no skeletons in David Corman's car. This man is as squeaky clean as it comes. But we're going to talk about both professional and personal. Before we get into our topic today, which will be about sports, because we both love sports and everybody loves hearing about sports. So we're going to talk about Toronto sports today, actually. But first and foremost is how we've kind of come together. And people ask me all the time, wait, your last name is Hakohen? It's not Korman? I thought you were Korman. I said, nope. And they said, so wait, you're partner in a law firm, but your name's not there. And I said, well, there's a reason why, because the firm was Korman's, and you're a Korman, obviously, and your cousin Jerry as well. And Jerry had originally founded the firm, and then you came to be, and then I came to be. So it's funny how it all evolves. But I told them, think of it essentially like Korman's is a brand. It's like Walmart. Like, if I came and owned Walmart tomorrow, I wouldn't change the name Walmart. So it's a known entity, and that's how I felt about the Korman's name.
Yeah, and that was sort of the decision to going to when we changed the name to Korman's LLP and put an S on the end of Korman. So we're sort of getting it away from it being purely our family name because it was sort of coincidental that Jerry and I got together. We happen to have the same last name, and his old firm had gone through different evolutions and different names, and it had a different name when I think when I first joined, it was Korman Turkin and something Korman Turkin Company, and then we changed it to Korman Associates at one point. But then we just sort of want to get just to a branding name, and so we put the S on it and became Korman's LLP. So I think when we first met, I said, we got to change your name to Huck Korman. I don't think you've officially gone through the name change yet, but you're a Korman as much as I am a Korman at Korman's.
I appreciate that. People either call me Jonathan Korman or Jonathan Chosen. They're not sure exactly
Yeah,
because we are the chosen lawyers,
the
obviously.
chosen Korman.
But for people to understand the name and the legacy of the Korman name, if when you're born as a Korman, essentially, unless you happen to be a famous author, there's going to be one of two professions you're going into. It's law or clothing, right?
Yep. Yeah, my family was in clothing, and it was something I did. I worked all my throughout my youth, and my high school days and everything, and beyond that with my dad in the clothing business. Whenever I had time off, and I loved the industry, but it was never something I really wanted to get into. Nor did they really encourage me to go into that. And law school was really something better for me, and that's the route I went. So, but I had a good source for clothing while he was in business, and my uncle was in business, and I got a brother-in-law in the clothing business. So I've been covered for the most part.
And so at least you had two options. For me, when I was born, I had no options because my father was a real estate lawyer before me, and my brother was supposed to be the real estate lawyer, but they moved from Israel to Canada. His English wasn't the best, so he came in as a teenager, so he went into accounting. So when I was born, all they said to me was, "You're going to be the lawyer.
You're
That's
gonna be
it."
the
And I
lawyer.
didn't know any different. I just knew I was going to be a lawyer. So I was literally programmed from day one for it. So it kind of made it easy that way. But as you know, when you get into the profession, I tell this to a lot of young lawyers, you have to eventually embrace your fit in this profession, not what you think the profession is going to be. You think it's sexy when you watch shows like back in the day, LA Law, Ally McBeal. Not quite as fun as it seems.
Yeah, no, and those shows were based on litigation firms for the most part, and a totally different lifestyle, different mentality to be that type of a lawyer than to be on the commercial side of transactions, trying to get deals done instead of fighting over deals that are falling apart. So, I never really wanted to go into that, and I don't think you did either. Like, we're more deal makers
Right.
than deal breakers, and and I like closing a deal with another lawyer to try and get it done, as opposed to fighting with another lawyer to see who's going to win for their clients. So, different mentality.
I remember when I had a litigation lawyer at a law firm come to me, the partner in the firm, and he said to me, "Why don't you come join the department? Why don't you come join the practice? Let's bring you into litigation. You're a great writer. You can help me with factums." I said to him, "I have no interest in litigation whatsoever." He looks at me, he goes, "What? You don't think I was a real estate corporate lawyer coming up? You don't go looking for litigation. Litigation goes looking for you." That was his motto to me.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there are people that do love litigation and are born to do it, but a lot of people I think are grown into it out of a need. Like I think in a lot of businesses, at the end of the day, especially when you're a young professional coming up, you see what the needs of the company are. You kind of find your niche, and not everybody gets to do what they thought they were going to do from day one, right?
Yeah, I think it's personality type. I think certain personalities are geared to be litigators. They're geared some for civil litigation, some for criminal law, because you have a stomach for that, some for family law, which I couldn't have a stomach for. And I think other personalities are much geared more towards a commercial type of practice. Whether it's real estate or business or something like that, just by the nature of your personality. You can't put a round peg in a square hole. You got to find the right thing for you.
Did
But
I?
I know we're going to talk sports, but
We are.
but
We
growing
are.
up, I was not going to be a lawyer. I thought I would be doing something in the sporting world. I even remember being in high school, applying for university and everything, thinking that I want to, from all the sports I played growing up, at some point I want to coach sports and teach sports, and maybe at the university level. And that's where I was really going until my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, said, "You got to aim a little bit higher, maybe." Than that. And I was always interested in law, but that's where my mindset was growing up, because I was just sports, sports, sports all the time. So I got to make a living doing something sports, maybe not as a professional athlete, but somewhere. That's what I thought I would do. And then made a right hand turn at some point and became a lawyer.
Well, let's start segueing over there because one of the things I was going to mention was the whole premise of the Chosen Life program is in reality, this is actually a spin-off show. So for those people out there who love Frasier, for example, well, Frasier was actually a spin-off from Cheers. And The Jeffersons back in the day was a great show. It was a spin-off from All in the Family. So in fact, The Chosen Life in some ways is a spin-off from your program called David and David on Real Estate, which I've been on a couple of times already at least. And it's funny how we all segue into it. So before we get started on sports, what I was going to say was the whole premise of today's episode, when I was thinking about it, was people that knew me and knew you through the program said, "Yeah, I know David Korman. Yeah, he's on David and David on Real Estate. Right. David loves real estate." And I tell him, "Wait a minute. David loves sports, right?" And they're, "What? David Korman loves sports?" And the reason they don't know is because it doesn't come up generally on your program, right? Your program is geared towards real estate and developments in the industry. You bring out all sorts of guests from that vicinity, but like again, where would it come up as far as sports except on the Chosen Life? So today you get to meet the well-rounded David Korman. No, yeah, the man loves real estate. He does a program on real estate, but guess what? The man loves sports as well.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I've always had a passion for sports, playing it and watching it, as you do. We're sports fans. And this morning we recorded our 60th episode of the David and David podcast, and we did a recap. And part of it was, there was a fairly early 2-part series that we did where we were talking about sports and how sports influenced us, him as a real estate broker, me as a lawyer, and as small business owners, and how stuff that we did while we were playing sports and watching sports and observing sports, there's so much that you learn. You don't even know you're learning it at the time. And later on, you're using some of that as in your professional life. Things, like the leadership techniques that I learned, playing sports and then coaching sports, and all the mentorship we had. And so we did a couple episodes on that. We were talking about it this morning on our recap show. And it just comes full circle. You don't even realize where some of this training came from. But so much of it, to me, goes back to sports. And as much as I like real estate and I love our law firm and practicing and helping people that way, when I go home or I'm just hanging out with friends, I'm not talking real estate very often unless they're asking me questions. I'd rather talk sports any day of the week, with my friends and family, and my kids are into it too. So that's why I'm excited to do this.
When you and I are sitting and, for example, we have interviews going on, how often are you and I using sports metaphors? Literally all the
All
time.
the time.
And we're always saying to ourselves, and even with the candidates, frankly, are you a team player? Are you a part of 25, 30 people?
Yep.
And are you going to function as a team, or are you a sole person? Like, do you play for yourself? There are sports that are very individual centric, like tennis, for example, unless you're in doubles.
Yep.
And versus, let's say, baseball, for example, where it's a complete team sport, right?
Right.
And especially when you're in a team environment, when you're running any kind of company that has any amount of employees, when you find people that have a sports mentality and playing as a team, I think they're going to function a lot better in that company as an employee and as a professional.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And I know you and I have talked about it too when we're trying to lead our law firm and hire good people and look for those team players. But we also focus on, what are their strengths and weaknesses? Where do they aspire to be? How can we help them get there? Because like you learn when you're running any team, you're only as good as your weakest player. And you got to find a good role for that weakest player. And even the weakest player, like I don't want to use that term weak because I don't think we have any weak people in our office, but you find out what they're better at. You use them, gear them to their strengths and help them develop. And the more you can do that, it just elevates the whole team to function better. So, these are concepts that come out of sports.
Yeah.
And we apply them in the business world.
How often have you seen a star athlete that did very well on a team, goes to a new city, new team, and just falters? And for whatever reason, it's just not clicking for them. They move on to another environment, and the light bulb goes on again. And for some people, they get so shell-shocked, I would say, that they never come back. It's amazing how different environments, different people, different coaching.
Right.
But I think it comes from in here as far as how they program themselves, what kind of self-talk they give themselves. And there are people that operate very gun shy, that are afraid to almost act, think, say, versus people that have that experience, build that up, and then they produce. And again, that's a very similar team setting. And I know you were an athlete coming up the ranks in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I was shocked to see you never played NBA basketball, even though you were a star basketball player back in the day, right?
Well, I don't know. At a certain level, I was able to play. Had I been taller, you never know what the opportunities could have been. But I'm 5'9" basketball player. I could jump in my day. My kids will think, no. Those are stories that he can't prove anymore. But I used to be able to touch a rim at 5'9" and get way above a rim. I could dunk when dunking wasn't allowed when I played. But you can only go so far unless you have the physical abilities as well. But I played at as high a level as I could play, basketball, through high school and university, at law school, in private leagues, and I grew up playing soccer too. And I won I'm very proud to say I won a Canadian championship as a soccer player when I was 14 years old with a group of guys. So I've played some sports at a relatively high level, not to become professional, but I had some fabulous training through that process, fabulous coaching in these sports, and you still draw on those things all the time.
If I was to grab one of your high school yearbooks, pull out one of the pictures there with a basketball, would I be able to use that as a thumbnail for this episode?
Yeah, you might have to get permission from the other guy that was part of that picture. But it's funny, you do something in high school, which was a long time ago for me, and I get reminded of it all the time. From you got to be careful. In the modern day, you got to be really careful where you're taking pictures. But this was a picture that was actually in our high school yearbook, and it just sort of became famous. And over 40 years later, I'm reminded of it all the time.
So it was with yourself, a basketball, a friend, and that's about it, right?
Well, we each had a basketball.
Mm-hmm. You didn't share the basketball.
We didn't share a basketball. We each had basketballs for our high school picture. We were the co-presidents of the Boys Athletic Association, and they had to they wanted to put pictures for the yearbook, and we decided to get a photographer into the boys' locker room, and we stripped down. And we're holding nothing but basketballs. The school decided to put that picture in. Like, we were covered up with the basketballs, And when the yearbook came out, I remember the head of the phys ed department put a poster size of this in the showcase that had all the trophies with a caption of this picture saying that ping pong balls would suffice with these pictures. And he wouldn't take that down in spite of our protests. It was up there for weeks, that picture.
Well, I'm going to tell you that I don't have this picture. I'm not planning to post this picture, but I can tell you that people are not going to leave it in the comments. And I certainly encourage people to subscribe, leave their comments. You know, David, you happen to have that picture? Feel free to share it. I'm sure it'll bring good conversation.
Yeah.
Now, getting to today's topic, David, you've been your whole life around Toronto sports,
Yes.
as I have. You have seen the sporting world a few more years than I have in this landscape. And we were talking about it off air, and we're going to stick to the five major sports here. And we're going to go one by one. Today's a State of the Union address for Toronto sports. Where are we at with each team? And when is the next parade coming? When's the next championship? Where are these teams at in general? So, being a sports fan in Toronto, I know you're going to love this.
Mhm.
So, I'm going to jump right into it. We're going to start with team number one because they're the most active currently, and it being the Toronto Blue Jays in Major League Baseball, MLB. And one of the things you were talking about was you were a fan of baseball in Toronto before we had the Blue Jays back in '77 when they came.
Right. And I went to opening game in the snow in '77, which I'll never forget. And actually, I went from that game down at Exhibition Stadium in the snow against the Chicago White Sox. When that game ended, I went over to Maple Leaf Gardens for a Leafs playoff game. So it was like one of the best doubleheaders I ever did. But I was a baseball fan way before Toronto got a team. I was rooting for them to get a team. And I hate to admit, the team that I used to love, but it was the Boston Red Sox. So, and I'm still a Boston fan of a lot of sports, but some of that just predated Toronto having a team. So like the Red Sox were my team before the Blue Jays arrived, but it was instantly that the Blue Jays arrived, it was a love affair with the Blue Jays. And Boston, you start hating as time goes on. But if the Blue Jays are out of it, some part of me still roots for Boston somehow. Same thing in basketball. Before the Raptors, I was a Boston Celtics fan.
And it's interesting because I have this Yankee affinity, and you want to talk about how the universe kind of works. So I've always loved the Yankees for whatever reason, just the folklore and the history of them. Two of my favorite players were Joe DiMaggio and Nick Swisher, both on the Yankees. And turns out all three of us share a birthday. What are the odds?
Really?
Yes.
Really?
What are the odds of that? They maybe lived a little bit more of a glamorous life than I did. But again, we have that kind of connection. Now, the connection in Toronto, when you talk about baseball, it has to come up with the San Francisco Giants because on two different occasions, there was threat that the Giants were going to move to Toronto.
Right.
First time, a lot of people know before we got the expansion team Blue Jays, the Giants threatened to move here. But during the peak World Series years, when the Giants didn't have their new stadium, they threatened to put a second team in Toronto because we were that much of a baseball market, apparently. And they were talking about putting them in Exhibition Stadium at that time.
Right.
Now, I've only seen one game in Exhibition Stadium my whole life. It was, I think, a 20-inning affair or 19-inning affair with the Seattle Mariners. It was my first game ever live. I didn't know. Like, I was very young, and I thought, are all games supposed to be like this? But sitting on the hard benches at Exhibition Stadium in that cold air by the lake was atrocious.
Yeah.
How did anybody go there?
Yeah, look, it was a challenge, for them to get enough people in there. And if you remember, like they built like the baseball stadium part of it, like the horseshoe around first base and third base, but they still used in the outfield, they were using like the old football stadium that would go, about halfway across the outfield. And that was the less expensive seats. And, you go in there and you had a terrible view of the game and a terrible angle. It wasn't nearly as good experience. But it wasn't great. The part that they built just for baseball wasn't great either. But it still gave them enough capacity to have a major league team in, and they get some huge crowds in, even though some people were sitting way out in the outfield, like you couldn't even see the game from there.
Considering now in this day and age in baseball that Oakland is lucky to get sometimes 4,000 people in there, it goes to show you the stadium makes a big difference. Now, when they opened up the Sky Dome at the time, which is now called the Rogers Center, which I think they should have called Rogers Field. I think it would sound a lot more baseball-like. That was considered at the time the eighth wonder of the world. It was such a big deal. And then before you knew it, we were the last of the cement stadiums. All of a sudden, they had all these open air stadiums with the grass. They found a way to have stadiums with retractable roofs that could have grass. They looked at the feasibility to do that in Toronto. They decided not to do it for whatever reason, but they are upgrading the stadium. They've started the renovations. It's looking pretty great. They have big plans for it into the future. So let's assume right now in Toronto, I think times are good from a baseball fan point of view. You got yourself decent to good stadium with a great stadium ahead with all the renos. You got a nice young team going, playoff contenders. Where the Blue Jays are at today, do you see us having a parade anytime soon? Do you see the World Series coming to Toronto?
I think they're on track. They've got a very competitive team right now, and they're probably only a few players away of really being that contending team. They might even be good enough right now because they can put it together. The biggest problem I think the Jays have is the division that they're in. It's just hard to get out of that division. Like they can have a great season, and then all of a sudden the Yankees, like they did this year, came out of nowhere. Nobody predicted that they were going to have the type of season to just run away with the division. Now they've come back a little bit lately, and if they continue on playing the way they have the last couple of weeks, maybe it'll actually get closer. But this year it's the Yankees. Last year it was Tampa. The year before it was Boston. We got Baltimore coming up. It's tough just to win their division. If you don't win your division, then you're in the wild card spot, which is tough to compete for. And and then you don't get the home field advantage. You get a tougher opponent in the first round. It makes it really hard. So anybody coming out of the Blue Jays conference, the East, has a difficult task.
I remember growing up, the biggest rivalries I loved watching with the Blue Jays were the Tigers and the Brewers. I thought those were great rivals for us. Brewers, from a geography point of view, I kind of get them in the Central, but the Tigers, for us not to be in the same division as the Tigers with our proximity,
Right.
I always thought was insanity.
Yeah.
And I think it's time for realignment, not just from the playability standpoint, like the Yankees should be in the same division with the Mets, or we're going to do a complete overhaul, but just having the Tigers, just with the pure proximity and the rivalry and bringing that back, I think it'd be a lot of fun. But man, like we got it very tough, and I don't see it changing anytime soon. I mean, the Rays, they just find a way with great, I guess, coaching and analytics and everything else, how they put it together. But as long as you have the Yankees and the Red Sox there, you're always going to be in for a battle pretty much.
Yeah, especially, it's a league that doesn't have a salary cap. So no matter what the Jays spend, no matter how successful the Jays are, and they've been a very successful franchise, they get TV revenue, they get a good gate all the time, they sell a lot of merchandise. But no matter what they spend on players, they're always going to be outspent by the Yankees and the Red Sox. So unless the rules changed and they put a cap on it, Toronto's always going to be a disadvantage. And the Red Sox and the Yankees are always going to find a way to spend enough to be competitive.
Now,
that's hard.
But with all the wild card teams, being able to squeak in, I think, is realistic for a lot of teams. And once you're in there, once you're in a short series, you never know what's going to happen. For me right now, where I'm seeing the Jays, I still love the amount of young players we got, the hitters, but it's that pitching. It's always pitching. And if you think back to our World Series years, how strong and dominating our pitching is. You technically think about right now, Ryu's gone. He was supposed to be our ace, essentially. Right. Barrios is kind of there, not there. Manoah's,
good at home, not on the road, or is it the other way around? Yeah,
he's inconsistent at best.
Yeah,
Manoah's great. The relief pitching is hit and miss. I think without top solid pitching at the end of the day, I can't see this thing going. My greatest concern is eventually the young players are going to grow up, salary cap, or as far as until you start paying luxury tax, and some of these guys are going to reach free agency at some point. I don't know. They want to play in Toronto, not want to play in Toronto, so somebody want to move on just for whatever reason. It's hard to keep this day and age in any professional league a core group of young players, because eventually it's going to burst unless literally like there's unlimited money. And I don't think the Jays are prepared to spend unlimited money. I think they're prepared to go over the cap each year, but I think that our window is starting to shrink little by little. And this year, for example, I don't see it happening on any level. If you look at the National League, where the Cardinals, the Dodgers, like some of these powerhouse teams, like we're not even close on the pitching end. The Yankees just gave up a pitcher in a trade at the deadline, Montgomery, and he's been lights out for the Cardinals. And I'm like watching this thinking, how do you give up pitching in this day and age?
How can they give him up when the Yankees are the contending team?
Yeah.
But
that's how it kind of goes.
Because of their depth of pitching.
So from the Jays' point of view right now, if I was a betting man, I can't see the World Series happening. I think they'll get into the playoffs, maybe squeak in. Don't know if they'll even get past the one round. But once we start to lose one or two of those young core players, I think it's going to become undone, unfortunately. And I've lived through it so many years now, as you have. After those World Series years, we never recovered. It seems like we're constantly playing in that mediocre, kind of middle of the road kind of sense, as a lot of teams are in baseball. It seems like literally there's few upper teams, a lot at the bottom, and there's these middle teams. I feel like we're in the middle all the time, and I don't see a future where the Jays are actually going to win the World Series anytime in this core's group.
Well, I think your analysis is bang on. I agree with you. It all comes down to pitching. Because you look at other teams, you watch some visiting teams come in that we don't see all the time, that we don't know really well, and you see who's batting leadoff for them, and then who's batting second, and they got a really good guy, young up and cover, and then someone's really good as hitting third, and they got someone good at 4 and 5, and then it tails off. And it's every team. Everybody's got what they think is a really good core, and they put them in the order, 1 to 5 or 6, and then it starts to tail off. So I look at the Jays the same way. Like, the Jays are really good. They can put a really good batting lineup. They can look really good one day. But I don't think they're that different. As much, we're homers, so we think, Bichette is better than your Bichette, or our Vladdy's better than your Vladdy. But a lot of these guys are really on par. Every team's got this core of 3 or 4 or 5 guys, and then they fill around them. But what distinguishes the teams that are really going to win and not win, I think it all comes down to pitching. Having those, not just 5 starters, but you need a 6, 7, sometimes an 8 starter, because guys are going to break down. So you have to have that in the system. And then you got to have a lights out bullpen. And I think that's where the Jays come up short. So I'd put our starting 9, fielders, outfielders, and infielders against most teams. But I don't think we got the pitching that the Dodgers have, and the Yankees have, and Houston has.
And I don't have anything against Mark Shapiro, and that group together. The one that I was shocked, quite frankly, was we had our guy, Double A, Alex Anthopoulos, and he goes off. He's a VP or whatever he was with the Dodgers for a little while. They're doing well. Shows up in Atlanta. Look at where the Braves are at. Look at where the Jays are at. I think there's your answer right there. And, when you had somebody, especially homegrown like that, leading at the top, to me, a lot of it comes from the top. Wherever you're staying at the top, that trickles down. As we'll talk about the other teams, it seems to be pretty consistent that way. If Anthopoulos was leading it, I feel a lot better about where we're at as far as pulling the trigger on certain moves and everything else, the way he's shown. This group, I feel like, is content right now to stay middle to top middle of the road. And maybe that brings in money, and maybe that brings in a new stadium, but it's not bringing championships, period.
And I think they admitted that when they hired these guys, and the philosophy that these guys showed, it was like, no, we have a plan. We have an ability to get our team competitive year after year after year. We can challenge to be a playoff team and build up our system and build up our firm so we can be competitive. But they haven't shown us once that they got the guts when you're really competitive. Are you going to make those key moves to take you over the top, to really go for a run for it? And they seem to back off from that every year and say, no, we're going to be competitive. We're going to be good enough to make the playoffs, and maybe we get through a round or two and just fall short. But they're not making those key moves. Like when the Jays won, when they won the World Series, they picked up guys, at the deadline to put them over. They picked up, David Cohn, and they picked up, like great players, Ricky Henderson, to get them over the top. And if they hadn't done that, they would have been a good competitive team. Maybe they would have won, but chances are they wouldn't have, because they wouldn't have had the depth in pitching, the depth in the everyday players to push them over the top. And I don't think the current group is doing that. They've never shown that risky move.
Yeah, there was talks we were going to get Soto, and we did not. But I remember very vividly when Tulowitzki came here and that group came together, right? We put up all those moves at that deadline. But what happened? We took off the Batista bat flip. That was a great time.
Mm-hmm.
Not seeing that right now,
Right.
And I don't know if we're going to. I'm actually laughing in my mind to ask you this question, but as we're transitioning to the next league, who actually which conglomerate owns the Jays? Is it Rogers alone on that one? Do you know offhand?
Yeah, I think it's Rogers.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. It's not an MLSE team.
Right.
It's Rogers, as far as I know.
So this is the funny part of it. We're both sports fans, lifelong sports fans, lived in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. And some of these things we kind of have to question ourselves. Who owns it? Where are they playing out of? this will kind of come up. So that's I kind of had to ask myself a couple of times.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's Rogers. Well, Rogers is very concerned about selling subscriptions to internet and phones, etc. They're playing out of the Rogers Center. They advertise that throughout Blue Jays games. To me, the Jays are a medium to sell the main product. The Jays are not the main product.
Right.
Period.
Right.
Transitioning,
which is why they want to keep them competitive year after year after year, because that's profitable. And if they go the other route and throw all their chips in, and you might get a championship, but then you might go through a 10-year period of not being very good, because that follows sometimes. I don't think this franchise wants to take that risk. They want to be more consistent, profit making, have content for their for Rogers.
Let's switch gears now to the one team, the one league where I'm telling you I see the most promise, most excitement in this city, and it's the Toronto Raptors. 10,000%. Can tell you this, having gone to enough sports cities around North America, and there's a buzz about the Raptors wherever you go. People love what they're doing, and to me, that starts with on top, Masai Ujiri. Like, what else can you say about the man except for that's a leader?
Yeah, that's a leader, world-class guy. What you hear about him, what he's done away from the Raptors, what he does in the Canadian community, what he does in his home country community, and all the other things that he supports, he gets a tremendous amount of respect around. It all comes back. You put stuff into community, but you get the respect back, and that's why players are prepared to listen to him and consider Toronto as an option. And I think you're right. It all comes down to his type of leadership. But there's also a guy who was prepared to make the bold move to win a championship.
Yeah, I mean, look at the move, the Kawhi Leonard move. Now, you look at when Kawhi went to the Clippers and how that played out. That could have easily gone our way also as far as load management, injuries, issues with team doctors, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
I think we caught lightning in the bottle that year. I think we got him at the right place at the right time. It all came together nicely. That was a magical year. We all felt it living in the city.
Mm-hmm.
We can't tell you we knew we were going to win the championship, but we knew we had a chance every night. And that was a great, great feeling. In many ways, I kind of think maybe they lucked out as far as not having signed him to a long-term deal because it hasn't played out so well in the Clippers. We may have been during that as well. But look at how the team has been functioning since he left. That's, to me, a model of a team. You have some very talented people, some mediocre players. They all play to their strengths. They play as a team, though. And that's one of the things I love about watching the Raptors, even without Kawhi.
Yeah, and look, it was a ballsy move. You're getting rid of DeMar DeRozan, an all-star in the league, and all these years later, he's still an all-star. He's sort of carrying like the Chicago franchise right now. But they sort of recognize that he, as good as he is, and as talented as he is, he's not necessarily the type of player that makes everybody around him better. It's more, give him the ball and clear out, and he'll do it, and he can score. But I think adding Kawhi has sort of taught everybody else, like, here's a guy who's really good offensively, but man, this guy can get down and play defense. And he's going to get that big steal when you need it. And he pushes everybody else to do the same thing. So it's guys like, Fred VanVleet that learn from that. And Siakam, who are up and comers, and they see this guy, with his reputation, he's already a champion, and he's diving for balls, and he's playing as hard on defense as anybody. And they say, okay, if he could do it, I could do it. That's what it takes to win, and you got to recognize that. And I think that's what the management did. That's why they needed Kawhi. It's not just how good Kawhi could be; it's can he elevate everybody else. And some athletes do that, and some don't.
So the hot rumor in Toronto, it's been there for a while now, is this guy named KD, Kevin Durant. Maybe a bit of a malcontent, you can say. Whatever being's going on with him today or tomorrow. And same thing with Kyrie Irving. We don't hear about Kyrie here at all, but we sure hear about KD. And my question to you is, what are the chances you think the Raptors get KD? And do you even want KD here, knowing the price you're going to have to pay to get him?
Personally, my short answer is no, I don't want him. I think fabulous basketball player, an all-time great. I've got a huge amount of respect for what he can do on a basketball court. But he's 34 years old. He's averaged playing 41 games a season over the last 8 years. Okay. Heard that on the radio coming down here today, so I didn't make that up.
Excellent.
So when you look at that, like
Scary.
there's a significant price to pay to get him, because if Toronto were to get him, they would have to give up significant assets. That's what the Nets were looking for. So you're going to get rid of a couple, one or two of your current starters, plus some benching, plus a whole bunch of draft picks. He's 34 years old, and chances are he's not going to play more than half the games. So who's playing when he's not playing? And even if he is playing, do you have enough around him to go for the championship? When they did it with Kawhi, it was different. We didn't have to, we gave up a major guy in DeMar DeRozan, but we didn't have to strip the team. So when Kawhi got here, there was enough around him to be competitive. And then he happened to elevate everybody's game because of the type of player and his leadership on the court. So it worked. I don't see that working with a 34-year-old broken down Kevin Durant, as good as he can be. I don't see it.
But on that token, without KD, you look at the core they have right now, I'm really excited about it. Like Scotty Barnes, like people were kind of flacking on him a little bit for drafting him. And what did he do? He just went out and got the Rookie of the Year. He was one of our most consistent players, if not our most consistent players last year. High energy guy, amazing on both ends of the court. That's a guy you build around. And if we're going to get KD, we're going to lose him.
You're going to lose him.
There's no deal without him, apparently. And likely Siakam as well. Why would you gut your team at that point? You're right.
Yeah, then who's KD playing with when he is here? Like, is there enough to be competitive, let alone win a championship? Because you're going to get your team stripped and you're going to lose all your draft picks in your future. I'd rather take my chances with Scotty Barnes and his development, because he may not be a Kevin Durant, but he can certainly be at least a DeMar DeRozan type player that you could build around and be a really key piece. And you got Fred VanVleet and you got a few other guys, and you look for the next guy and you do the next draft. I think their chances of winning might be greater over the next few years by continuing building that way, as opposed to trying to go for, I like the idea of going for a home run sometimes like we did last time, but I don't think KD's the right guy to do it at his age and with his injuries.
I love how in sports, things go in cycles. So for example, in baseball, Kansas City wins the World Series because they have 3 closers in the bullpen. 7, 8, 9.
Right.
So that's a new formula. Right. Everybody needs to have 3 closers. Right. That's the way it's going to be. In basketball, when you have Shaq, everybody needs that big man. We're going to build around a big man. Then all of a sudden, you got now Golden State. So everybody wants to shoot threes. Everybody tries to build this model. I would say in basketball, compared to any other sport, real team, 5 guys on the court mainly, plus your bench. When you have the same core consistently and they've grown up together like they did in Golden State, never mind the KD years, but I could see in Toronto, if you left this core the way it is, everybody's healthy, everybody's playing to their max, I think we got a real shot this year and every year, the way the basketball landscape is set up. I mean, this whole idea of now the super teams, and you got to have 2 superstars, 3 superstars, back to 2 superstars, I think that's all washed away. I don't think there's a clear formula now, but I think the Raptors are in a really good spot now and into the future.
Yeah, and I think some of that is their coaching. And I think some of that's just the evolution of the modern basketball player. Like when I grew up playing, you found the biggest guy you could find, and he was your center. And then you had the next 2 biggest guys were your forwards, and you tried to teach them some low post stuff, and they're playing in the corners. And then you had your 2 guards, and one might have been a point guard, one was a shooting guard, but you still had 2 guards. And so you found that's how everybody built the team. You had Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, you had Wilt Chamberlain. Everybody's looking for that, and then you find your Jerry West or your Oscar Robertson, and you got guys shooting. Basketball is completely different. I think the Raptors really recognized this last year. It was like, who are our 5 best athletes? Let's get them on the court at the same time. Don't forget about what number the position is or what you call the position. Let's put our 5 best athletes on, because they're all, 6'4" to 6'10", and put the best 5 guys, and they can all play defense. And they can all play all over the court, and don't give them a number anymore, and don't give them a position anymore. Let's just put our 5 best athletes and let them go play. And then one of those guys is tired. Let's give him a breather and get the next guy in there. And I think that's what Nick Nurse was doing last year. And I thought it was a brilliant way to play basketball. They're all such good athletes. You don't have to pigeon a guy. So, oh no, you're 6'10" or 6'11". You can only play with your back to the basket and learn how to take hook shots like Jabbar did. Like, no, you could face the basket. You could shoot 3-pointers. You could play it anywhere. And then you got to switch off, which is how basketball's defense is played. You're switching off constantly, so anybody can cover anybody. You got to be, you got to be Fred VanVleet's got to cover a guy 6'10" sometimes and be able to do it effectively. And I think they're learning that. So I love the way they play now.
And, people have this thing, this bias saying that, the West is so strong and everything's in the West. But yeah, maybe it's very concentrated at the top of the West. But the teams that are good in the East, they're really, really good. You got Milwaukee's always a threat. Philadelphia's always a threat. The team that I think is most Boston. The team that I think is most similar to me is Raptors is the Heat. And I simply because great coaching, GM, president, they have stability. A lot of those guys have been there for a while. They brought in the right free agents. I love the mix. I went down to Miami last year, got to see a couple of Heat games. And I got to say, like, consistently, like including the bench, like wow, they are a scary, scary team. And it all begins for them with Jimmy Butler, but they got great players that are like 1A, 1B, 1C. So they're not quite a super team, but they're more of a team concept. And that's where I see the Raptors going. So I think if they can get past the Heat, I think they have a pretty good shot. But like you're saying, Boston's pretty scary too. And there's a lot of good teams out there.
Yeah, like last year, I thought the Heat was going to win it. I think the Heat healthy, they could have stayed healthy. I think they were the team to beat because Jimmy Butler plays that Kawhi rule. Like he can sit back, let everybody do their thing the first 3 quarters, but we need baskets in the fourth quarter. Like he's unbelievable, and you need a steal in the fourth quarter. He's unbelievable, and they bring in a veteran like Kyle Lowry, who we all love, and he shows leadership and he shows guts. And then they got the young guys, so there's a good mix of the old and the young. Hero, and they got some really good players there. They ran into a lot of injuries, but I think they've got a good coaching. So look out for them this year.
So we both think that the Raptors may have a good shot this year. So we're feeling good about the franchise as a whole and as far as their championship aspirations.
Yeah. I'm not sure if they could win it because there's a lot of real good competition, like you said. But I think they're going to be as competitive as anybody. And as these guys grow and mature, like I'd give them a chance as opposed to blowing it up.
So now, transitioning wise, I'm going to be saving what I would call the best for last or the controversial for last. So we have 5 technically leagues. I'm not going to count lacrosse into this. We're going to get into football as number 3. So when we're getting into football now, one of my first questions, because you're more up than me, I take it that the Buffalo Bills have stopped the Toronto experiment. That's over now.
Yes.
No longer the Toronto Buffalo Bills.
That's done.
That's done. That did not go so well.
No, and I bought tickets for that series.
How long ago did that end? Would you figure?
Oh, it's at least 5 years or more.
It feels more.
And I love Buffalo Bills. Like I'm a fan. Like I was a season ticket holder in Buffalo for a couple of years.
Really?
And went to some games there, and that's a lot more fun to go to the games and do the tailgating in Buffalo than it ever was in Toronto, where they tried to create some fake tailgating. But it just didn't work. And Buffalo's got enough. They're a great team right now. Like they're a team that like a real contender. They were last year too, and I think they are this year. So it'll be fun. But I'm sort of glad that experiment is over because it was like we had sort of like fake NFL here. It wasn't real NFL.
Well, I mean, the rumor was at some point that they would slowly transition them to Toronto altogether, and they'd be the Toronto Bills. And of course, the city of Buffalo. It's funny. Anybody that I know ever from Buffalo, in any of their social media, they always have Buffalo Bills gear. Like they love their Bills. Like they love the Sabres, but they really love the Bills.
Yeah.
So I understand they're not going anywhere, and they're definitely not coming here. So if we want football right now, it's not going to be NFL football. For our American and worldwide friends, there's another league. It's called the CFL, the Canadian Football League. So, to my surprise, it is still going. Right?
It is.
It is. Is it?
It
Are
is.
they? Okay. So this is how much I know. I had to ask you yesterday. So are they playing in the same field as Toronto FC, the soccer team? So that is a yes.
Yes.
The fact that I had no idea where they're playing was not a good sign. I don't know where to buy tickets because I don't even know when the season is. Are they playing right now?
Yeah, they're playing right now. They generally start, I think, late June, early July. The season starts, and then because it's supposed to end, usually the Grey Cup is in November.
So they are actually.
So the NFL is just getting going. They're
so it's been going for a few weeks.
Oh yeah, they're more than halfway through already.
Okay, so that's really bad that I don't know that.
Yeah.
Wasn't sure who. So ownership wise, I thought that originally the same owner as the British Columbia team. That is not the case.
Right.
MLSC owns them. You indicated.
MLSC owns the Argos now.
We don't think that they own the Jays, but we're pretty sure that they own the football team and the soccer team and the hockey team.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got that. Mike Pinball Clemens, the greatest Toronto Argonaut of all time. Is he a coach or a president now?
I think he's like a president, quasi GM. Maybe he is the GM. I'm not
But he's not the
quite
coach.
sure. He's not the coach,
Okay.
but he's involved in everything the Argos do, and pretty much these days,
Okay.
as far as I know. And he's he's front and center of any media stuff that they're doing. And
I swear I'm not being
I was,
I swear I'm not being sarcastic. I genuinely have no
well,
clue. I get zero notifications on any of my social media that this league does not exist whatsoever. I didn't even know the season was going on right now. That's how bad it is for me.
I can tell you a little Mike Pinball Clemens story for anybody not like he's one of the greatest Argos of all time. He's about, how tall is he? 5'5", 5'6".
If that. And one of the greatest human beings ever.
Yeah,
Ever.
and a great ambassador for sports, for charities, like his
City of Toronto,
nonstop
everything.
charities.
Yes.
And he's known like internationally because he's that type of person, all around good guy. So, not sure the year, but it was the year that it was. I think it was the very first game the Argos played in the Sky Dome at the time, and I get invited down to the game by my wife's first cousin, who happened to be the team's dentist. So he invites me down, knowing that I'm a sports nut and everything. So I'm first game in pinball as a rookie at the time. So he's out there and he gets injured in the first half, and I'm in the locker room with him at halftime. They bring him back in the trainer's room because the dentist goes. He's a dentist. He's there. No one had a tooth problem, but he's in the room wherever he goes. I go. So we're in there, and they got him on the table and they're examining him, and they tell him he can. They can give him a shot in his knee or whatever it was, and they can get him back out there for the second half and everything. And so they're trying to talk about that. And I remember, the doctors and the coaches sort of left the room, and a veteran punter comes in, Hank Olisic, who was a Hall of Fame punter. But near the end of his career, he comes in, and I remember him going over and saying, like, Mike Pinball, like, don't do it. Don't take the shot. You got a long career ahead of you. They just want to try and win this game. You won't even feel your leg when you get out there. You never know what you're going to do. You could do permanent, like, don't do it. And I'm sitting there like a fly on the wall going like, wow, this is amazing. I can't believe I'm hearing this.
I wish you had an iPhone at the time.
Yeah. And no one did in those times. So it's just my memory. But you don't forget stuff like that. But he ended up taking the shot and got back out there. And luckily nothing bad happened to him. But I thought that was really informative, that the veteran guy is coming to him saying, hey, kid, like, don't do it. Don't succumb to the pressure. And he still did and went out there. So
that was the kind of guy, Mike Pinball Clemens. The name that I always associate with the Toronto Argonauts, again, this being Canadian CFL, Canadian Football League. So I associate Mike Pinball Clemens and Rocket Raghib Ismail.
Yeah.
That was a big deal. Like, it was, imagine like Kyler Murray coming to the CFL. That's the level of Ishmael coming to the CFL. Now, at the time, the Argonauts were owned by Wayne Gretzky, John Candy, and Bruce McNall.
Yeah.
Bruce has had some issues since then. Bruce calls the Kormans if you ever need assistance, at least from the real estate side.
Yeah, we can't do criminal law, though.
I think he's out now, though.
Yeah, I think he's out. I think
doing well.
I think he finished his time.
Yeah, he's doing well.
Yeah.
Hopefully he's not back into coin trading or whatever he was. It was actually like rare exotic coins. That's what did him in. But we won't get into Bruce McNall. John Candy since passed, God rest his soul. And Wayne Gretzky is active still in hockey and wines and all sorts of great stuff.
Yeah.
But they were the ones who brought Raghib Ismail. That was a big deal, booming for the CFL, which slowly led to expansion, which you and I reminisced about off the air, that American teams came to the Canadian Football League, which now seems so obscene, but they came. The glorious being that the Baltimore Stallions at the time won the Grey Cup. Our Stanley Cup is the Grey Cup in football for us. And shortly afterwards, Baltimore got an NFL team. The Baltimore Stallions were gone. All the Las Vegas Posse, was that their name?
Yep, Las Vegas Posse. Shreveport had a team.
Pirates, I think they were
Pirates, something like that. Like, there was some weird teams.
We had some cool teams at the time. Orlando had one, I believe.
Yeah.
And so they're all gone. No more American teams. We're left with the Canadian teams. And there was so lack of a good amount of nicknames that we actually at one point had two teams called the Rough Riders in this league. Like, that's how bad it got. There's a million names you could think of. They're like, no, Rough Riders is the best team. And so we actually had two Rough Riders for a point in time.
Yeah, for a long time. Like, there's only 9 teams in the league. And we have Saskatchewan Rough Riders and the Ottawa Rough Riders. And I'm not 100% sure, but I think one of them, Rough Riders, was spelt as one word and one was spelt as 2 words. But they couldn't come up with something else, like we talked about the other day, like There aren't enough animals out there, enough birds you can name a franchise after. You got to come up with something, enough a hurricane, a storm, like there's something, anything. How hard is it to come up with a name?
So,
and out of 9 teams, 2 have the same nickname, and they allow that?
So then Ottawa gets another team, and they're saying, okay, we're not going to be the Rough Riders now. We're not going to pay the fee to get that name back. We're going to come up with something original. We're going to be the Red Blacks. What the heck is a Red Black?
Don't know. I'm sure they did some sort of study of different names to come up with this, but
was it like a group of 3-year-olds finger painting at this point? Like,
their colors were always black, white, and red, like the uniforms, and it may have come out of that. I don't know, but that's as good as they could come up with. Like, go Red Blacks, like, or Black Reds. I don't know what they're called.
Red Blacks.
How do you cheer for them? Like, how do you?
Let's go Red Blacks.
Yeah, I don't know.
But David Korman, though, being the genius that he is and the sporting mind that he is, has the solution, though, of owning a CFL team. There's only one reason to own a Canadian Football League franchise. Why is that, David?
Well, and I've learned this through people I know that are very involved in the league, and it's a really tough league as a businessman to try and make a profit,
or a businesswoman,
a business person to make a living in. Just by the nature of the league, they don't draw enough. The gates not enough. They can't charge enough tickets for those that do come to the games right now. Gone are the days, even in Toronto, like when I grew up, like the Argos were a big deal, and we'd bet down at Exhibition Stadium, and they're drawing 33,000 people, the capacity for every home game in those days. It was tough to get a ticket, so in those days, the franchise could actually make some money. But those days are gone, except for a couple of the franchises, like my understanding, like Saskatchewan, which is really a hometown. It's their only professional sports team. So if you're living in Regina or anywhere in the province, you're a big Saskatchewan Rough Rider fan. So, and maybe this, Winnipeg to some degree. But most of the teams, they don't make money. They're losing money, and the owners are losing money until they get a Grey Cup. Hosting a Grey Cup is a big event. So they could lose money for a few years, and all of a sudden you host a Grey Cup. You can make a lot of that money back by hosting a Grey Cup. And that's just the way the league's been operating for a number of years.
To me, the insanity of it, and we also talked about this off the air. It's funny, we have a lot of this conversation. I'm saying, we've got to save this for when we go on the air.
Yeah.
But there's only one way to this league to possibly survive, because I'm shocked it's still even going, to be quite frank, just because of the lack of viewership and attention that they get, is make it into a D league. The way in NBA, they have their minor league franchises, and slowly all sports have them. How do you not have a minor league level for the NFL? And by all means, let's make a real deal here, because otherwise the XFL, I'm sure, is going to try to grab that with the attention they're getting through The Rock, and try to be a minor league system for the NFL, and then you can get some of their players, and hopefully you can get some money booted to there. I can't see otherwise how this league continues, period.
Yeah, I know for a fact, I don't remember the exact time, but I know that they've looked at that at different times with the NFL and the CFL, and they've had certain agreements between them that are more cooperative, so you can take a player mid-season in the CFL. Because again, the CFL starts like in June, and you get to Labor Day, they're already more than halfway through, and the NFL is just getting going. So the NFL would pick off certain players, year after year, that might be better in the CFL than the guys they have in their training camp. So I know that they've had discussions, negotiations, certain agreements over that. But I think what the NFL has really discovered is their farm system is the American college system. They got so many players coming up every single year. They got a whole new crop that every single guy wants to play in the NFL. And a lot of them are really good too. And the reality is, it's such a brutal sport that the lifespan for most of these, the career span for most of these players in the NFL, it's 2, 3, 4 years. Like we hear about the Tom Brady's going around for 20 years, but if he was an offensive lineman, he's not playing for 20 years. If he's a running back, he's not playing for that long. Like, it's the odd guy that has a long career. Most of them have a really short time frame. So I think it's way less expensive for them just draft guys every year and bring them on and have taxi squads and develop them that way, than really look to the CFL for a couple diamonds in the rough.
And think how crazy it is as far as the amount of games we're talking about here. Like, talk about baseball. We start off with baseball. 162 game season, 81 home games plus preseason, playoffs, whatever. Then you start getting into hockey and basketball. and 81 games or 82 games, whatever they're at, and then 40-something odd home games. In football, you're talking about maybe 16 games,
Right.
maybe 8 home games.
Right.
Like, how do you not sell out 8 games in a year? Like, it's not possible unless you're that bad or from a league standpoint. One of the things that just kind of occurred to me, we're talking about leadership of the Toronto teams. Think about in the whole CFL as it is. Do you know who the commissioner is?
The CFL?
Yeah.
Armbros or something like that.
I
can't think of his name right now. Yeah.
But like John Tory was at one point, right?
Yeah,
I believe.
yeah.
And the thing is, if you think about the leagues that most thrive, their commissioners are there a long time, like 20, 30 years plus. Think how long Bettman's been in the NHL. Think how long the NFL was with they switched over. They had their commissioner for Tagliabue, and then now it's Goodell, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's consistency. Major League Baseball, as far as Bud Selig goes, and now Rob Manfred has his issues, but again, it's still consistency, and they're there. CFL has changed over their commissioners so many times, I can't even think of who the person is now. And then you get into the Toronto Argonauts themselves, and I was trying to think of who the ownership was. Can you name me one player on the team?
Right now?
Yeah.
No.
Who's their starting quarterback?
Don't know.
Me neither. Is it Barker? Oh, he was the coach. I don't know.
No.
That's where we're at.
No, it's terrible. And I grew up as a CFL fan, and I was a season ticket holder not long ago when they first went into the stadium that they're in. I took my two sons to games who are sports nuts as much as I am. They love sports, but it was so boring. The game was so boring, and I'm like, but wait, but there's this. I couldn't make enough excuses, and they don't want to go back. The game itself is not as exciting as it once used to be. A fabulous product with really good players. Now you get some games that are really exciting, and some of the CFL rules I love. It's a great brand of football because CFL properly played under those rules, it can be way more exciting than an NFL game. But you need players and you need consistency. You need really good quarterbacks. It's a quarterback league, and without a good quarterback, team has no chance.
I could tell you that as a general sports fan, a sports lover that I am, there's certain teams and certain leagues that I more gravitate to. Going to see the NFL live, I don't know if anything beats it. It is utterly insanity. I've been to Detroit, I've been to Buffalo and Pittsburgh. It's the best thing on earth if you're a sports fan to watch teams live on a given Sunday.
Yeah.
I've been to one Toronto Argonauts game my whole life. That's it. And don't plan on seeing any further. Right now, do you even know what the record of the Argos is at this point?
I know they're just above 500. I think they're a first place team, but it's like everybody's sort of bunched up. Like you lose one game and you're in second or third. They're there. They're competitive. They're as competitive as anybody. And look, I don't mean to be bash CFL. I love the CFL, and I really want it to do well. I've got a friend who's an owner of one of the franchises right now, so I'm rooting for them to do well, make a comeback. And I know he has certain frustrations by it because it's 9 different owners who are in very different markets, and they can't come up with some unity of what's best for the league. And in any business, you can have a law firm of 9 partners, but if they're not on the same page as what's best for the firm, and everybody's just looking out for their own practice, eventually the partnership's not going to work, right? The firm's not going to work because you have 9 different firms operating. And that's sort of the way the CFL is right now. They've got everybody sort of doing their own thing, and nobody's thinking bigger picture, what's best for the league. And it's hard for them to get everybody together that way.
Toronto gets labeled as a sports town. Like, we love our sports. And all I say to that is go look at some of the attendance numbers for the Blue Jays over the course of the last few years before they got hot again, so to speak. Look at our minor league numbers as far as minor league baseball, minor league hockey. We're finicky fans. We like winners, and we gravitate to the Leafs. We gravitate to the Raptors, occasionally to the Blue Jays. Like, it's a tough market to crack as a sports team in general. Mm-hmm. And if we had the NFL, I'm pretty certain we would have sold out, but we don't. And that's where I'm kind of seeing now from the CFL point of view. We're talking about the State of the Union. If we hosted the Grey Cup game, I don't know if I would know about it. If we were in the Grey Cup in any city, I don't know if I'd know about it. And I don't know what the parade would even look like. That's where they're at. And that's something I think that they have to assess as a team, as a league. Because I'm not going to sit and blame the Argonauts. No, far from it. I think it's a whole league epidemic at that point.
Yeah. Look, and I did attend Grey Cup parades in this city, and they were fabulous. And I was just as exciting as a Blue Jays parade or the Raptors parade. Like, it was a big deal. But that era has sort of gone.
Yep.
Because, back when I became a CFL fan, the Raptors didn't exist. The Blue Jays didn't exist. It was the Leafs and the Argos. Like,
Yep.
those were the franchise. There was no soccer team in the city. So, the Argos in the CFL were a big deal. So, but you can't go back to that, because no matter what you do, everybody, sports fans like me and you, we like all the sports. So if you're going to some Leaf games, you're going to some Raptors games, you go to some Blue Jays games, you might go to a soccer game. It just gets down the totem pole of priorities, and you like the NFL too. So it's hard to fit everything in. And Toronto's a big city, and we got all these franchises right now.
And that's one of the great segues to team number 4 and league number 4. I would say if there was any hope from a football standpoint, it's the competition. And, the newest sister in town that's been here now for actually a number of years, but it still feels relatively new, is our soccer team.
Mm-hmm.
So we're not in the European leagues. We are in the MLS. That's the league called?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
Major League Soccer.
Team is owned by MLSE.
Yeah.
They play in the MLS, and they are called Toronto FC. Toronto Football Club, but it's soccer football.
Yeah.
So that is, and for a while they were one of the hotter leagues, hotter teams, I would say, in the city. They got when their stadium got built up, and David Beckham was playing in LA. There was a lot of buzz around it.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing I could say about soccer, being a North American soccer observer, and I'm not gonna say soccer fan or hater, I'm just gonna say I'm an observer at this point, is people get excited when those cachet names come over to the league. And it's usually when they're in the tail end of their careers and they're getting paid big bucks and they don't want to stay in Europe or wherever they are, and then they come over here. That's my impression of North American soccer.
Yeah. Look, and I think it's like TFC is a real success story, I think, from a business point of view. I think it came out of nowhere. The franchise as a like the quality of soccer and their success was horrible for a long period of time. They took a long time to put a competitive team out there, but in the meantime, they created a fan base that's like that just absolutely loves it, and the fan base has grown. And I went to games in the early days when the team was terrible, and you hope you saw a good visiting team come in, but you always had a good time down there. It was a lot of fun. But I grew up playing soccer, so I know a little bit of the difference of good soccer and not such good soccer. But the quality of soccer in the league wasn't great, because, like you said, it was bringing in guys past the front. Like Pele played in this league, when the league was first formed, and then later, more recently, guys like David Beckham. And there's always some guys on the downside of their career that come over and play, and it's great to see these guys. But the type of soccer that's played in this league is very different from what you'll see in the big leagues in other countries. It's, I've talked to you off the air, it's more comparable. If you have the NHL with the best players in the world, and then you've got the American Hockey League. So sometimes it looks like the American Hockey League. Sometimes it looks like the East Coast Hockey League, with some of the caliber. But there's certain players on every team that are world class, that are as good as anybody. But you don't see them able to play that type of soccer because it's not 11 guys on the field at the same time playing that level of soccer.
So, silly question for you. Are they currently playing? Is the season going on?
Yeah.
They are.
Yeah.
Again, I did not know that.
And it's hard to know when the soccer season is.
No idea.
And I don't really know either. It seems like they're always playing.
Kind of.
Because sometimes they're playing in the winter, sometimes
because they're doing friendly matches.
Yeah, there's different leagues.
Yes.
and there's different competitions, and it's not all like I don't know what I couldn't tell you what the actual start date is for the league and when the championships are, like what their actual season is, because it seems like the team is always playing beyond that. They're starting earlier and they're playing later because they're playing in these other competitions too.
Why do they call them friendlies? Why don't they call them hate matches? Wouldn't it be much more interesting? Will they sell more tickets?
Yeah.
If they say this is bitter rivalry match instead of friendly?
Well, that's your background in wrestling coming through. You want everything to be a grudge match. It's to the death. It's the steel cage match. It's right.
I can tell you, Monday night I was there at Scotiabank Arena. WWE was taping Monday Night Raw, and the place was packed, and people were yelling. It was amazing. Edge came back, the Canadian wrestler. And we had a great time. I knew when that was coming up. I'm following that vividly.
Yeah.
And put me in for a night of Monday Night Raw over North American soccer any day of the week. I am the happiest guy possible. I was wearing my Macho Man shirt. It was fabulous.
Yeah. And I grew up, we've talked about it before. I grew up a wrestling fan too. I used to go down to Maple Leaf Gardens Sunday night. It was usually their wrestling card. And this was like before the WWE and WWF days.
WWF.
Yeah. So like
Yes.
it predated that, but it was like the place was jammed. You couldn't get more people in the building for a Sunday night card. We had the Sheik and Lord Athol Leighton was running the show, and you had some of these now are considered legends, but back in the day. But then wrestling was taken to a whole different level with Vince McMahon and when he created that and everything. But man, it was a great sporting event in Toronto back in those days too.
So maybe at halftime at Toronto FC when they're playing MLS style soccer, maybe at the halftime show they can bring a wrestling ring and have some wrestling. I'm more likely going to be watching it that way.
Brilliant.
Yes.
Brilliant.
But that being said, from what I'm hearing, it's funny. A lot of times in life, you don't hear necessarily when good things are going well, but you sure as hell hear when it's going bad. And I'll say this much about Toronto FC. I don't ever read anything negative about them. Maybe I'm not reading very much, but I'm sure not reading anything negative. And I got to say this much. They win a championship, there's going to be a parade, and people, the ones I see wearing the gear, there are fans out there.
Yeah, no, and they had a championship a few years ago, and now they were just sort of a bit of a slide since then. But same thing, they're a team that was close to a championship, and they made a couple bold moves and brought in a couple world-class players, and sort of pushed them over the top, and they had a championship season, and they were extremely competitive for a few years. And now the more recent years, they're a bit of they're a bit of a downslide, but now they've just signed a couple other guys that might bring them back up if they can. They got a couple. They've got their Kawhi Leonard type of guys in place now, but they got to get enough of a surrounding cast to make them competitive again.
I got to say that I don't have the numbers in front of me, but when you see what they paid for an expansion fee back then and what the teams are worth now, for the most part, unless you're in the CFL, sorry against CFL, but at almost any professional sports league at this point, how much these teams are now worth, it's astronomical money. If you think about when George Bush Jr. went and owned the Texas Rangers and sold it at the time, I don't know, for like $200 million or whatever it is, and seemed like a lot of money. Now we're talking into the billions. Like we're now talking sports leagues in the billions. So MLSC is laughing all the way to the bank on that one. It's been a good investment. And also for all us major markets, for the most part, go turn on your channels on your cable box, and you have 900 channels, and you have at least 60 different sports ones. They need content to fill it. They can only watch so much poker at the end of the day. So having live sports is a big deal. So it's great to see we have a sports league in that sense.
Yeah.
I don't see us ever moving to the European League, but again, it's good that we just have more sports, but obviously keeping it competitive. So it seems like they're in a good shape. And so we're going to talk last and certainly least is their big brother, and that's the team that rules Toronto sports, and that is the Toronto Maple Leafs. Toronto Maple Leafs are so big that sitting in Monday Night Raw, they had limited edition Toronto Maple Leaf Edge shirts for one night only.
Really?
Why do I need a shirt? I'm a wrestler named Edge showing Toronto Maple Leafs.
Yeah.
And as he was finishing off his the match, and he did win, by the way, just beat Damian Priest. And, they didn't cheat, and also that was good on Edge. But when Edge gave his speech afterwards, he was talking about how he'll be back in another year. Probably around August of 2023. He's going to wrestle his last match ever. It'll be in Toronto. The Toronto fans were all captivated by this. And he ended it off with a chant of "Go Leafs, go."
Leafs, go.
The whole arena was going bananas saying "Go Leafs, go."
Right.
You cannot escape these guys, even going to wrestling. If you're in Toronto, you're going to talk about the Leafs.
Yeah.
So,
and not easy to be a Leafs fan. It's fun in so many ways, but what other franchise, professional league franchise, can a team not succeed for 55 years and still have a following and the passion that the Toronto Maple Leafs have? 55 years since they won the championship, and not even like a sniff since. Like they haven't been in the finals since. They've had a couple of runs here or there. But it's disappointment after
one run. The Doug Gilmour, Wayne Gretzky series. That was it.
Right. That's as close as they came, and they've just missed opportunities. But it doesn't matter. Like it's bulletproof. There's just such a loyalty, such a passion for the Leafs, and it's always like, well, there's next year, and there's and every as a diehard, that's what I always think. As they got a great team to watch, great, really exciting regular season game. They've got some fabulous players. We talk about world class players. As good as they have. You put them up against anybody, but they haven't been able to finish the deal. They haven't been able to get that run going in the playoffs.
So you've been around Toronto sports long enough. You've been around the Toronto Maple Leafs long enough. I've talked about the Leafs ad nauseum with my good friend Zach Rain, our good friend Zach Rain.
Yep.
Come on a couple of times to talk about the Leafs on The Chosen Life. But I'm going to ask you now, in your estimation, is there a bit of a conspiracy theory going? The theory to me goes like this. The Leafs actually win it. The people will feel saturated. They won't care as much. It's that hope for the next year, and the carrot that's dangling. In some ways, are they purposely sabotaging themselves so they keep those fans going?
Yeah, I don't buy it. I think the level that they'll achieve if they actually win here will be like none other anywhere else in the history of sports, in Canada anyways. Like you just can't compare it to anything. There's such a loyalty from coast to coast and other places in the world, wherever the Leafs go. When the Leafs, are playing in LA, half the building is Leaf fans. When they're playing in Florida, 3/4 of the building is Leafs fans. They play in New York. They play wherever they are. There's displaced Canadians and Leaf fans everywhere. They'll all come out of the woodwork. They'll all be celebrating. It'll be the greatest thing ever. And if they actually do it, the guys that are on the team are immortalized. If it whether it be Matthews, Marner, or whoever it's going to be that be on that team, they'll be immortalized in this city. Like we're still talking about the '67 team.
Yes.
And and like Johnny Bower and all the guys that were and Dave Keon and the guys that were part of that team are part of Toronto folklore. And the reason they stay so high is because it's been 55 years since anybody else has won. So those guys are always the champions because there's nobody that's come along to replace them. So whoever does that will be immortalized in this city. And I think the franchise will reach levels that it's never could even imagine. So you think they're going to sell a few more shirts and a few more banners and things like that if they win, and that'll last for a period of time, and maybe it'll come back, but it'll never look. They've been this successful this long without winning. You can only imagine the heights they'd reach by winning.
So I had a solution with Zach. Zach kind of liked it. I'll see how you're going to feel about this. But I think there's only one way to do this. It's Theo Epstein. So Theo Epstein in baseball goes and gets rid of the Red Sox curse, gets rid of the Cubs curse. Now he's consulting Major League Baseball and equity firms and making his coin, and he's a very happy man. I mean, this man is a proven curse killer. This is clearly a curse at this point. It's nothing but a curse.
Yeah.
And I don't know if any shaman can fix the Leafs at this point. So bring in Theo Epstein.
Maybe Theo's the guy.
Theo's the guy. Whatever you did in baseball, just use the same logic. The way you got pitching for the Red Sox, get some goaltending for the Leafs, and just put this team together, put a well-rounded sports team. I think any executive in any sport, really, unless you were a person that grew up and played that sport, you take your principles and you go run any franchise like that. Let's bring in Theo Epstein. There you go.
Well, he might be the solution. I think you're onto something there. And I think the Leafs, probably the best comparison would be the Boston Red Sox, as teams that have money, have systems, have a minor league system, have feeder systems, have good players, can be competitive, and then they didn't win for so long. They just couldn't win, right? And then once they won, did that make, was it over and done? It was no. Okay, we won. Now we got to do it again in a couple of years. We got, right? There's that hunger to keep it going, and they managed to win a couple more. But it's, they got to get past that first curse. So if it takes bringing Theo in, I'm all for it.
I mean, you look at the Red Sox when they had solid ownership, solid GM, solid coaching. It all came together. The Maple Leafs, for what the history when I was growing up, did not have the most solid ownership on the planet. He had a bit of a recluse, we can call him, Mr. Harold Ballard.
Right.
And it was a bit of a shit show. Let's just call it what it was.
Right.
But once they got the ownership structure together and Mr. Tannenbaum's doing great things there, we have, I think, really good, for most part, administratively, the executives. Then we got the coaching part. I think we just can somehow to tie this thing together. And, there's so, in some way like the Blue Jays, they're so on the cusp. They have all these wingers and scorers the same way the Jays have all these hitters, goaltending, pitching. It all comes down to it. Like I always bring up Binnington in St. Louis. man, when you have a goaltender that the puck looks like a beach ball for him,
Right.
it's so fun to watch.
Right.
You take Binnington when he was doing it on St. Louis, put him on the Leafs. Oh my God, we're not losing a game all year
Right.
with what we have.
Right.
So I hope they're going to put it together. In my estimation right now, if I'm a betting man, I'm going to Vegas. I think I'm going to go on record now. If they stay fairly healthy, they're going to win a round this year for sure. That's where I see it going. But I don't see it going past that. And they're in a league where they're choked with that cap. Like there's no way around it. Like you got capologists figure out, okay, I'm going to put this guy on the injured reserve and then bring him back as the playoffs start. And it's not going to count against the cap. You have to do all these semantics. But when you have like 5 wingers that are all going to get 5 million plus, it ain't going to happen. So eventually we're going to have to lose our talent. And I can't see it happening. They better deliver this year or next year. I'm not going to say they're going to blow up the team, but changes are going to come. And I don't see it happening. Do you see a parade coming if you're going to go on record right now?
I really thought the last 2 years were great opportunities. The year with when we're playing in an all-Canadian division, to me, it was like a no-brainer we're going to come out of that division.
Right.
Like, who do we got to beat? We were beating up on these teams all year. Just got to beat them in the playoffs, and that gets us to the Stanley Cup Finals. And maybe we play a Colorado or a Tampa or somebody good in the finals, but we should get there. And they managed to blow that, right? And this past year too, I thought they had a tough draw in Tampa in the first round, but they were good enough to beat Tampa, but they didn't. They managed a way not to do it. Look, and I look at the Leafs as a franchise. Sometimes their timing has just been horrible. When there was no cap in the league, we had the worst owner. It was the Harold Ballard era that wasted a decade or more when they could have spent whatever they wanted to spend on coaching, on development, and bring in players, but he wouldn't spend the money. And by the time we got better ownership in that would do all that, they put a cap on it. And now we're screwed because of that. And, because if Toronto, the revenue that the Leafs can generate, if we were in a non-cap league, like we'd be the Yankees.
Right.
We'd be spending and we'd be winning championships. I'm convinced of that, right? But they're squeezed with the cap right now. So it's tough. It's not just about finding players. It's finding players that can fit in the salary that you're offering. That's a whole different challenge.
Well, look, we have people working on this day and night. We have people analyzing this day and night. I can tell you that on a lot of our posts, we've had a lot of comments. Most commented episodes of The Chosen Life, aside from wrestling, have been the Toronto Maple Leaf episodes, and people telling us, that we're geniuses or we're insane, and debating the whole idea of Patrick Kane coming on to the Leafs. Is that going to happen?
Yeah.
And the whole goaltending situation. So there's a lot of people watching and a lot of people commenting, and we'd love to hear from them and tell us, do you think this is going to be the year? Do you agree with my whole Theo Epstein theory? Let's talk about it. But, that's where it's really great about the community, where we can all debate it. And as if we're going to come to some consensus and then it's actually going to happen.
Right.
But that's unfortunately not the case. And that's one of the things that we love about sports.
But everybody in Toronto is a Toronto Maple Leafs general manager in their mind. Like everybody thinks that they know what has to be happening. Let's pick up Patrick. Let's pick up Kane and give him a bag of pucks. Like everybody always forgets that there's got to be something going the other way, right? So it's the same thing. It's back to the Kevin Durant argument. Like, do you want to strip your team to bring in one good player, strip your future, right? But everybody's an amateur GM, especially when it comes to the Leafs in Toronto, which is what makes it fun, and that's what keeps us going. And that's why we always say, well, there's next year. There's a few moves they can make them. And as Leaf fans, we spend as much time following the Leafs in the off season as we do in the regular season. Like we want to win the off season as much as we want to win the regular season.
The most items I get on my sports feed, and it just comes randomly based on stuff I've read before. I get so many hypothetical Maple Leaf trades all the time put into my feed for some reason. Things that make no sense whatsoever. Debating when a guy's going to be a free agent in 3 years from now if we're going to sign him.
Right.
It's absolutely obscene.
Right.
So looking past our generation and now being a grandfather and your grandkids as they're going to learn sports, what are you going to sum up today's episode, what are you going to teach your grandkids about Toronto sports, and what are you going to encourage them to root for? And for who?
I just sort of do the same thing I did with my own kids growing up. Like I think sports is such an important part of anybody growing up. I think you have to expose them to it. Now, some kids are going to gravitate it more than others. Some are going to like playing certain sports. And some are not going to be that interested, and they're going to take up music or drama, or they're going to do something else. But I think as a parent, you want to expose them to it and see if they find interest in it. And I'm already seeing that with my grandkids. Not much because my oldest one's only 5 years old, but I've got a 2-year-old grandson that's totally into sports already. Like knows Blue Jay. He can name he can go through the starting lineup. He's 2 years old. He can go to the starting lineup of Blue Jay. He'll get through the first 5 or 6 in the batting order in order. He knows the Blue Jays. He knows about the Leafs. We went down to a Marlies game with him this year. Loves it. You just see certain kids have a natural passion for it. Which sports they end up doing or liking or playing, you never know. But why not expose them to everything? Like I grew up with playing soccer, following soccer. I exposed my 2 sons to soccer. They wanted nothing to do with it. Nothing. They wanted to play hockey. Hockey, all day long. So you never know, but you expose them and then they decide what they like.
I grew up playing tennis and I grew up watching baseball and wrestling. We all find our stuff, but I agree with you 100%. Kids should have any kind of activity level. I think at a young age is really, really important. In playing any kind of sport, whether it's team sport, it's really good as far as learning teamwork, which will serve you later on in life, but learning individual sports as well. Following any kind of sport whatsoever. I know people very often think it's childish, it's silly, but you know what? There is a lot of reality into sports. And again, using those sports metaphors professionally, they do work.
Yeah.
And especially, look, you end up going to a dinner party or you're on somebody's boat, the conversation comes up. It's nice to have at least be able to fake it or be able to get by because people are always talking about it. So it's good to know what's going on in the sporting world community professionally as well.
No, I agree. And I think we learn from sports, whether you do it by playing it yourself or just following sports the way nuts like you and I do, you learn what works. And the Leafs, no matter how good their first and second line are, they could put 6 fabulous players out there, world-class players. But if their third line sucks and gets outplayed by Tampa's third line, we end up losing the game. Right. And the same thing in baseball. You can have the greatest, 1 through 5 or 6 hitters, but if your 7, 8, 9 guys can't get a hit once in a while, it falls apart. So you learn you're only as good as, like I mentioned earlier, as the weakest links on your team. Find the right role, put them in the best position to achieve. And I think we learn that those type of lessons, we bring them to the business world and our family worlds. And you've got to find, what makes people tick and press the right buttons.
Well, David, I got to tell you, knowing you for the amount of years, it's been almost 8 years together, you and I, since we first met. I can tell you professionally and personally, you are the strongest link I know. You set the bar very, very high. And it's an absolute pleasure to work with you and to be friends with you day by day. And for people to reach out to you on social media, we'll have the handles, certainly, if they want to talk sports with you, talk real estate, corporate. I know you're very engaging. And so funny how many of your clients, that you're working with on a daily basis, you talk about everything but law. Inevitably, it always comes back to sports.
Yeah, a lot of it does. It's really something which is great. It makes being in the business world more fun too, because you develop relationships. It's all about relationships, and some of the common bonds we have, it comes back to sports because we live in the same city, we cheer for the same teams. So whether it's from a business point of view or it's your family members or your own kids, you got nothing to talk about. It goes, oh, how about those Blue Jays? And boom, you're off to a conversation, right? So it's an important part of our lives, and we learn a lot from it. So anyway, I really appreciate the opportunity to come on.
And hopefully we'll be together one day together on a parade soon enough.
Absolutely.
And I apologize. It's taken 35 plus episodes to get you on, but we had to get the set just right for you. And I got to tell you, the couch suits you completely. So hope to have you back sooner than to episode 70. So we'll have you before.
Yeah. Well, it's a great setting and a great opportunity. And just, that part of my chosen life, the David Korman chosen life, has Jonathan Hakohen in it. And you're a big part of it. And I'm glad we have this opportunity to do it. And I hope we do many more. I'm sure we'll have many more opportunities, either on the David and David podcast, on this podcast. We'll be doing it in the future too. So thanks for the opportunity.
My pleasure. Maybe one day it'll be the Mark Bagwell wrestling series. We'll never know. And as we sign off, I know your favorite part, right? We pull out the arms.
Yeah, I don't want to.
And we say,
I don't want to embarrass you.
Keep living the chosen life.
Living the chosen life.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.